So, good morning, everybody. If I can have your attention, it's 10 o'clock, and we're about to start our board meeting. Okay, if you can take your seats, that would be great. Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Tony Guglielmo, and I'd like to welcome you to TransLink's quarterly open board meeting. I would also like to thank those who are live streaming today's meeting either through Facebook or Twitter. Thank you for joining us today as well. And at this point, I'd like to call the meeting to order. So first, before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that TransLink operates throughout the traditional territories of the Lower Mainland Coast Salish peoples, and specifically that this meeting is being held in the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam Nation. Before we begin, a few housekeeping items to address. First, from a safety perspective, as you know, TransLink takes the safety of its customers, employees, the board, and the public very seriously. So I'd like to remind you of the nearest emergency exit, which is just across from the hall. So in the event of an alarm, please exit in an orderly fashion and meet at the muster station, which is along the construction fence at the side of the building facing the Sapperton SkyTrain station. So for those using mobility devices, please do not use the elevator, but gather in the vicinity of the stairwell and enter that safe refuge area. Our floor wardens will report your location to the fire department so that they can prioritize your safe exit from the building. And lastly, in the event of an earthquake, please remember to drop, cover, and hold until the shaking has stopped. Before we begin, it's also my pleasure to introduce and welcome Michelle Landrick, the new BC-RTC President and General Manager, to his first TransLink board meeting. Do I see Michelle? There you go. So Michelle has over 20 years of experience in the transportation sector, having served as Managing Director for Auckland Transport Rail. And he was also the CEO for Transdev in Auckland. And before that, he was the Operations Director for the Dutch Railways in The Hague, which is in the Netherlands, where Michelle grew up. So on behalf of the board, welcome to TransLink, Michelle. So we have lots to discuss today. So we're going to begin with items under the consent agenda. There's two items, the public board meetings minutes for June 19th and our response to the delegation. Can I get someone to move the? Moved? All in favor? Approved, carried. Thank you. We'll next move to our public delegations. We have two speakers today. So I would ask the first speaker, Isabel Kolick, if she is here. Isabel, there I see you. If you would like to come up to the front here. Turn on your speaker and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Isabel Kolick. I'm the Executive Director of the Heights Merchants Association, BIA, Business Improvement Area. Our area has approximately 330 businesses and employs around 2,000 people in great accessible local jobs in a wide pay range. Our merchants are the heart of a fantastic neighborhood of more than 10,000 diverse residents. Many of our businesses are household names across the region, such as Valley Bakery, Glenburn Soda, Chaffee's, Anton's Pasta, to name a few. Quite a few are award-winning, such as Chez Christophe Chocolaterie, Custodio Photographers, and Glue Studios. We have a rich local culture, amazing community amenities and schools, and are frequently named as one of the best places to live in the Lower Mainland. We have a strong, caring, and well-connected community of merchants and residents since the 1910s. Our 12-block district is located along Hastings Street, which is a major thoroughfare in the region, as you know. For 100 years, these 12 blocks have served as our community street. This is where we stop and we talk to our neighbors in the mornings, where merchants sweep their sidewalks and say hello, where shoppers tie up their dogs at the lampposts and parents push their babies in their strollers. After 80 or so years of serving as a community street, in 1996, our neighborhood was forced to accept an HOV lane on Hastings, a moving curbside lane of rush hour traffic. We lost our pedestrian friendliness during prime business hours and succumbed to flying debris, the danger of moving vehicles, and more than 80 decibels of noise every rush hour. We lost 50% of our prime street parking during the busiest shopping period of the day, 5 days a week for 23 years. Our merchants at the time told us that they lost up to 20% of their business, never to regain it. That Monday to Friday after work business did not just reappear on Saturday, it was gone forever. The argument in the 1990s was that more than 44,000 vehicles used Hastings each day, and traffic engineers wanted to keep traffic moving faster. Do you know how many vehicles use Hastings today? It's a lot fewer than in 1996. Thanks to the West Coast Express, the Millennium SkyTrain, Highway 1 expansion, and the Evergreen Line, the number of vehicles on Hastings today ranges from 25,000 to 34,000 cars a day, a decrease of 25 to 33% from the car-centric 1990s. Small business owners today face many pressures. Competition from big box stores, major shopping malls, and online shopping are the obvious ones, but also higher rents and property taxes, MSP, rising minimum wages. So on top of all of this, to take away customer access to prime street front parking and impose an unfriendly pedestrian and shopping environment is untenable. And putting moving traffic right next to where shoppers and pedestrians walk, shop, and socialize is detrimental to the healthy, multifaceted, job-creating, and commute-minimizing communities that regional leaders claim to support. Our studies show that our district attracts shopping that is quick and convenient, the 30 to 60 minute kind, the drop in, grab your groceries, and bring your kid to dance lesson kind. And this depends on easy access parking, not drive around the block 4 times and park 2 blocks away kind of parking. In addition, the moving lanes of traffic next to the pedestrian curbside converts a pleasant sidewalk to a noisy, dirty, and dangerous freeway environment. So if ever Hastings did need 5 lanes of moving traffic, it's certainly not needed today, as people have other transportation choices and Hastings traffic volume has substantially decreased. So today I'm asking you to try to understand our situation and the kind of main street that we long to have. Our merchants are asking to have our parking and pedestrian friendliness restored to how it was for nearly 90 years on Hastings prior to 1996. And if you want regional commuters to use that infrastructure like the Evergreen Line and West Coast Express and others that TransLink and the BC government spent billions on, you can't continue to make it easy and fast to drive. And we know that TransLink is considering various rapid bus routes in the region as well, which is a good idea, but we strongly and passionately ask that TransLink exempt our 12-block Burnaby Heights portion of Hastings Street from any assignment of a dedicated bus lane at curbside. This permanent loss of parking and non-stop moving traffic would just devastate us. Thank you very much for your attention and your time. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Isabel, for your coming here and your presentation.
Any questions? Am I allowed to ask for any questions?
I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I think
Okay.
your
All right.
presentation was
much.
fulsome. There are no questions.
Okay.
Again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Lisa Arlen. Is Lisa here? I don't see anyone standing up, so I'm assuming Lisa couldn't make it this morning. So I guess, again, thank you to the public delegation in terms of your presentations, and we'll just move on to our next item on the agenda. So I'm going to call on Kevin Desmond, who's our CEO, and he's going to provide a report.
Thank you, Tony, and good morning, everybody. So just a few updates on what's been going on during the course of the summer. As always, a busy summer, and it's always nice to start with the business of TransLink, and that's transporting people and our ridership. Through August of this year, ridership continues to grow at a fairly healthy pace. at about 4% ridership increase compared to last year. If that trend continues through the end of the year, we will then, by the end of 2019, have a well in excess of 20% growth in ridership over the 4-year period, 2016 through 2019. So the demand is still there. The demand clearly being fueled by an ongoing strong economy in our region, and we are able to match that, at least to a degree, with the service improvements that have been funded through the mayor's plan. And we did add service on a number of different important products on September 3rd. CBus got to its 10-minute headways. We added service on the Expo and Millennium line with the first of the 7 new trains coming in as funded in the first phase of the mayor's plan. The rest of that service will be scheduled in about a year from now as the rest of the trains come in. And we're also looking, of course, at Canada Line service improvements starting early next year as those vehicles begin to arrive from Korea, and a number of bus route service increases also went into effect on September 3rd. So we're continuing to add services up across the board. All of the products are seeing service increases, actually led by HandyDart. HandyDart year to date is up 4.8%. And that's actually understating the demand curve on HandyDart to a degree because of the poor weather in February. It significantly reduces ridership on HandyDart. So we're beginning to see really the demand curve pick up pretty strongly as a result of the service improvements that have been funded by the mayor's plan. And in fact, year to date, we're averaging about 1,000 more trips than planned per month. So we are beginning to see a little bit of stress on the system as demand is pushing it. The good news is we'll be adding additional service in October, about a 2% increase as funded by the mayor's plan, and an additional service increase in January. And our operator is hiring another 40 new drivers by year end. So we're doing our best to meet the capacity with the demand on HandyDart. But it's good to see that the demand growing at the rate I think that we actually expected, if not more so. The other thing I'd say that's notable is even with that 4% increase in average daily ridership, we're seeing a fairly significant bump up in weekend demand for the TransLink system, up about 5.3%. So in my view, we're increasingly seeing people choosing transit for their trips, even if they are not journey to work types of trips. We remain very, very much focused on how the increasing demands on the system and the crowding on the SkyTrain network and the crowding on the bus network will be affecting the demand curve going forward. Because I think the reality is that to a degree, we're just not actually keeping up with the demand. That is really some of the reality of the crowding in the system. Maybe a good problem to have, but it's a problem that we've got to deal with as we work with our policymakers on the next phase funding of the program. From a few things on community and public engagement, I'll lead with Transport 2050. You'll recall that starting in May, we commenced what we hope to be, and as it turns out has been, the largest public engagement really in TransLink's history. We want the general public to really feel like they had a part in the drafting and the approval of the next long-range plan next year. So this whole summer was very much focused on getting input from the general public, and it was kind of capped by the P&E and the exhibition that we had during the P&E, and we saw just huge numbers of people going through that exhibit. So far, what we've gotten is tens of thousands of people that have logged into the website, that have provided input, several thousand ideas. That was one of the elements of the website as well. So we want to just get general input on what's important to people, their values, but also what are their ideas. And we'll have more to say on that as we continue to sift through that information. The P&E, and what was so, I think, great about the P&E and the location, some of you I know on the board went to the fair and saw the exhibit. We estimate that something like 200,000 people went through the exhibit over the 16 days. And something like 7,000 people on the busiest days went into the double-decker bus. It was one of the two main attractions at the fair. The other was the virtual reality little exhibit as well. So it was really great to see that kind of public engagement. As well, we also partnered with the fair to increase bus service to the fair. So we added some buses, we added some hours, we had a 36% increase in ridership to the fair. So I think that shows kind of both a nice partnership with the fair to get citizens to one of our great activities, but also I think it helped get people to our exhibit on the T2050. We'll be reporting out a lot more on this in the weeks and months ahead as we compile the information and take it on to the next round of public engagement next year. Also, we were very proud this summer to, for the first time, partner with the Vancouver Pride Society, and we walked in the Pride Parade and had a couple of buses, fully wrapped articulated buses. Something like 50 employees came out and participated in the fair. Leading up to the event, the team produced an employee video profiling profiles shared on social media. And within the community, we featured our openly LGBTQ employees and their stories at our monthly coffee chat. So this social media content reached something like 60,000 people, and the videos had something like 40,000 views. So as part of our overall diversity commitment as TransLink, we were very proud to engage in that during the course of the summer. As you know, a couple weeks ago, we hosted for the first time in Canada, after 25 years in existence, the Railvolution Conference. It was, by all counts, we have heard both from participants during the conference and after the fact, it was considered one of the most successful conferences in the program's history. About 1,300 delegates came to our region to talk about land use and transit and progressive policy makings about sustainable communities in the future. I do want to give hats off to Sarah Ross, who spent the better part of 2 years working with the Railvolution organizers, working with the City of Vancouver and other partners here in our region to help pull off a great conference. She emceed the opening event, which included Mayor Cote, who gave some opening remarks, and Bowen Ma, the parliamentary secretary, as well. She also, I think we're going to enlist Sarah as one of our top faces of TransLink to sell TransLink swag on our website. I believe as a result of some shameless advertising on stage, we dramatically upped the amount of goods we were able to sell at the TransLink store. So she did double duty, I think, but hats off to Sarah and to all the TransLink volunteers for that matter, to make that a successful conference. Thank you. Yesterday, Mayor Cote and I were joined by the president or the chair of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the vice chair of UBCM for a little press conference to talk about the Mayor's Cure Congestion campaign and FCM's demand for sustainable and significant funding from all of the federal, provincial federal parties in this upcoming election. I think the main theme is that if we are going to continue nationwide, this is not just a BC or Lower Mainland issue. If we're going to continue to build out the necessary multimodal systems that urban centers in this nation need, we need predictable, sustained, and significant funding to make that happen. So we've been, the mayors with their Cure Congestion campaign really have been doubling down, but I think that we got a message out yesterday. Those messages continue, I think, to resonate very well. So I want to thank Mayor Cote as well for kicking that off. Several weeks ago, some of the board members were part of this. We finally launched the beginning of a new era here at TransLink and our 4 battery electric buses. You'll hear from Mike McDaniel in a few minutes in his regular report about the project. But it is marking the beginning of what is an inevitable transition to zero-emission electrified fleet. If we can get funding support from senior government partners, which really is going to be necessary, particularly for the charging infrastructure, given the fleet replacement plan and the fleet expansion plan in the next decade. By the end of the next decade, we could see 40% of our fleet converted to zero emission. I do want to point out we have the second largest zero emission fleet of buses in North America. San Francisco has slightly more trolley buses than we do, so we have that experience. That's a long-standing experience from BC Transit days and Coast Mountain Bus Company, but we need to up our game. And we really can see, we can feel it, we can taste it. The technology is there. We just need to figure out how to fund the program going forward. But we're really, really excited of starting what we believe is the first in the world completely interoperable tests of different systems. So it's 2 different bus manufacturers, Nova and New Flyer, our partners, and 2 different charging manufacturers, ABB and Siemens. To our knowledge, no one else in the world is actually trying to interoperate those various different systems. We believe that's absolutely essential for the more rapid uptake and the smart uptake of zero-emission fleet as well. So each one of these buses can reduce about 100 tons of GHG emissions. So more to come in Mike's presentation going forward. On the awards front, we're very happy that the Commercial Broadway Station upgrade has won the Vancouver Regional Construction Association's Excellence Silver Award and is the running for the gold medal. The Metrotown Station received a similar award last year. The VRCA recognizes the finest companies, projects, and individuals in the construction industry. So if you've been through the Commercial Broadway Station, since it was completed several months ago, it really is it took a while to get there, but it really is a very well done outcome, adds a lot of circulation capacity for our customers, and that's really what it's all about. So to Sani Zain and his crew, as well as our consultants, our design consultants on the project, congratulations for that award. The last thing I want to talk about, and if you look at the screen, we of course are very committed to safety. You heard that from Tony in his kickoff. You'll see that in both Michelle and Mike's presentations on the bus and SkyTrain side. But I wanted to point out that next week, I believe on Sunday, as a matter of fact, we will be kicking off a safety marketing campaign for the fall. And this campaign is largely about slips, trips, and falls. So you can see on the screen, this is the nature of how the campaign is going to roll out. These sort of graphic images, we try to have fun. Some of you have probably seen internationally the types of marketing images, whether it's for safety issues or customer conduct on trains and buses and so forth. You always have to find something fun to get people's attention around important issues. In this case, this is what our marketing team has put together. Each of these types of messages are going to show up throughout the system. I have some, let's see. So it's going to go in a variety of different ways. Eventually, it's going to show up on hundreds of buses, on most of the SkyTrain. But we'll do some, we're going to have 5 experiential buses, for example, that are going to have a lot of these. They're going to be on the ceilings. They're going to be wrapped around some of the interior pieces. 2 of the rapid buses will be fully wrapped with some of this imagery as well. So if you're out in the system, you will see this. If you're just walking along the streets, you'll see some of the wrap buses. But it's a great campaign. The campaign's going to run for about 2 months, again, starting on September 30th and through the end of November. It's very important to make sure our customers and our passengers are safe all the time. So we want to make sure that we're giving them all the tips necessary to be safe when they're using our system. That's my report, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. Looking forward to that campaign. So are there any questions for Kevin's report? Marcella?
Thanks for the comprehensive report. I just want to compliment you on the safety side. I know there's a huge focus on the safety internally within the employees of the organization, and I think it's absolutely terrific to see it being taken outside and to deal with all of our customers and the safety of our customers and make it very visible about how we can all take care of ourselves when we're on transit. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Thanks to your team.
I mean, that's very much our attitude. There's so much internally that we need to do to keep our employees safe. There's so much internally we need to do on the training side, and so on and so forth. But yes, the customers and general public, we need to help them be safe when they're interacting with the system as well.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Michelle, who's our new president and general manager of the BC Rapid Transit Company, if he would like to come and present his report. Welcome, Michelle.
Welcome. It's great to be here. Vancouver has a great dynamics to it, and I'm excited to take on this role and to give my first presentation to the board. These are some of the topics I would like to discuss. They're all close to my heart, and we'll quickly go through slide by slide. So this slide I put in because when I just arrived, and it was 29 days ago from today, the first question I was asked, what will have your priority? And I basically said safety, people, and performance, and probably in that order. Safety, because without safety we don't have railways. And safety, because I firmly believe that all our customers and all our employees have the right to go home each day unhurt and uninjured, unharmed and uninjured. That's basically an obligation that we've got. People, because this is a service industry, and without people, there's nothing we can actually bring to our customers. Also because people make our product. We connect communities, we connect friends and families together, and we put a smile on people's faces when they see us first thing in the morning. And performance, because without performance, that's the product that we sell. We sell a comfortable and smooth ride on time and safely. So without performance, we don't have a product. When you look at this sheet, is very close to my heart because there's not much you can do as a leader in the first month or so. But focusing the minds on safety is probably and showing leadership in safety is probably the easiest one. That doesn't mean that you have immediate results, but that's at least where you can focus people's minds on. When we go to the passenger injury slide, that trend is not coming down, and we investigated it after the last board meeting. And it shows that about 55% of our injuries are slip, trips and falls on escalators and stairs. And mainly in the evening hours and after the peak hours. Probably because people rush home, are possibly a little bit more relaxed after peak hour. So that's when these incidents happen. It has our attention. So we put a task force on this. One of the actions we're taking is the safety awareness campaign, where we ask people to hold on to handrails. Another one is that we are looking at a hotspot approach, because we know, for instance, that Grenfell Station is infamous in this sense, where we deploy our staff around hotspots so they can actually make people aware of the risks, particularly when it's slippery. Then we go to the right top-hand slide. This works if we see lost time injuries. This is also not very pretty. And that's why I've started actively focusing on a zero harm campaign with my team already. Zero harm is what I said. People can go home to their friends and families without any harm or injury at the end of the day. They go home in the same state as they arrived. What does it actually mean is that we're actively looking for hazards. We're actively looking at if people are actually following process. We're trying to learn from our mistakes, and we take care of each other. It's a take care kind of situation. I look over your shoulder to make sure that you're safe. In the past, they've already started with this, basically, so they have monthly updates with their teams on different subjects to discuss what they can do in their own area to make sure that people don't hurt themselves. And for me, even the smallest kind of incident is unacceptable, because eventually, after you have a lot of smaller ones, you could expect at some point a larger incident, and that's all what we're trying to avoid. So the focus is on it. Then employee physical assaults. That's always painful because people are just doing their jobs and then they get assaulted at work. And from my experience, it can really traumatize people. So we have it's got my full attention at this moment in time. 2018 actually seems to be an outlier in this sense. We can't really explain why it's that low, but it doesn't mean that we're not doing anything about it. Actually, we have just started customer service training for our station attendants, and part of it is rapid risk assessments, so they can understand the situation and know how to deal with it. Another part of it are conflict avoidance and de-escalation. You can never avoid the intoxicated person who just is out to get somebody, but we can help people to de-escalate situations and turn a bad situation in a good situation. On-time performance. Well, to be honest, I think this is world-class. 97.1% within 3 minutes is actually a great achievement. And for me, it's important because when we get this right, it leaves energy for us to focus on the future, get even better, and prepare ourselves for all the investments that are coming and making sure that we maintain performance. So for me, this is actually a great graph. We have recovered from February, and we will be preparing for next winter. But generally, this gives me a very good feeling about being here. State of good repair. This is one of the corporate priorities. And again, this is about avoiding firefighting, because firefighting just distracts. Eventually, we just want to be in a situation where we know that we can trust the system because that's the product that we're selling. Both when it comes to maintenance and the next slide, rolling stock, we've taken an approach where we want to move from reactive to preventive maintenance. And we gradually see that shift where all our efforts go more to preventive than reactive maintenance. And this is part of the same thing. So what we've done some grinding. Basically, we do the equivalent of the whole system on a yearly basis. Grinding makes the track smoother. In the same way you take out potholes in a road. If you don't do it, it will gradually deteriorate the track. The ride will become bumpier. It will make more noise. And generally, it's to keep the infrastructure in good repair, something you need to do. And we do a lot of it. And with results, because it actually contributes to reducing noise, which is currently some of the hot topics out there. And for those who want to know a little bit, we had some complaints about noise reduction between Metrotown and Royal Oak. And we basically ground both the inbound and the outbound direction last weekend to give some immediate results. Then vehicle maintenance. We do a lot. We have about 300 cars that we need to service on a daily basis. Also here we move to a preventative approach rather than a reactive approach. I always compare it to managing a nuclear power plant. Nobody wants to be reactive, everybody wants to be preventative, and there's a lot of pride in that. So we'll bring pride back into preventative maintenance. We're driving that forward because again, I hate firefighting, it's not doing the right thing. And we're on track with this one. And the last quarter of this year, our focus will be on changing out the bogies or the trucks for some. And that's all part of the Mark I overhaul program. Kevin already mentioned this. This week we actually took the 7th unit into service, revenue service. That's great stuff because we added 5% extra capacity on the Expo line and 9% on the Millennium line. More seats, more standing capacity, generally better service. That's what people want. And later this year and early next year, we'll add the other 7 units to the service, again increasing capacity and making sure that we can accommodate demand. Joyce Collingwood Station. What I didn't realize is that we have about 15,000 passengers boarding our trains from Collingwood Station each weekday. I think these improvements will give them a much better experience. I'm really excited about providing real-time information, because if you would ask me about one customer service item I would like to focus on, then it's information during disruption, because that's when people need it most. So when I read this, I think that was a great step in the right direction. Another thing that's not on this slide is that it comes with a new bus exchange program, and public transport is about integrated solutions. And so the possibility of offering people integrated, smooth solutions from bus to train, that's something that we should all strive for. It will increase patronage in the long run, if not immediately. And then finally, this shows you why public transport adds value to Vancouver. This is where it counts most. We had several events where we provided extra capacity. This was the Celebration of Light event. As you can see on the left-hand side, we accommodated 5,000 people more. We basically ran a peak service during the late night hours. Basically means that we step up when it's most needed, and we did it successfully. I wasn't there this year, but I make sure I'll be there next year. If not, often in a yellow vest, helping out and pointing people in the right direction. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle. So it's been only 29 days, you said?
29 days today.
You have a very good grasp on all the issues, and we look forward to working with you and seeing you at our future board meetings. So are there any questions for Michelle? I see Andy and then Murray.
Thank you. Welkom en bedankt, meneer.
Graag gedaan.
I'm really impressed with your report after such a short time being here. The state of good repair is something that I think is top of mind for all of us. And I just wonder if, under your maintenance slide, you had a caption there talking about the LIM rail being lowered. Could you just explain what that lowering was done for and what the outcome is?
I have to come back to you on that one.
Okay. Sorry.
I'm well prepared. That's a very technical question today. I need to get from one of my specialists.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Murray?
Thank you. I agree with Andy. Your report was very well done considering the short time you've been here. The question I have, and you may respond the same way as you did to Andy, but we were having, I guess, normal challenges with the delivery of the Mark III cars at the outset with respect to some of the, I guess, quality issues that the first trains being delivered didn't achieve some of the standards that we were expecting. Is that improving now that we're, in other words, the time for commissioning and readying them for service is being shortened as a result of the learnings that occurred earlier?
That I can confirm, because the other day I spoke to some of the suppliers and their representatives, and they acknowledged that the first two units, they were basically learning how to put them together. Currently they're in a much better position, and they're speeding up the delivery. So they've learned from their lessons, and they're basically promising better, and I think we're doing better.
And so the schedule that had been outlined earlier this year for completing delivery and having them go into service is being maintained, is that right? We're expecting things to go as scheduled?
I don't think I can confirm that the schedule is being maintained. I can confirm that we will put in the extra capacity as planned.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay. Marcella?
Thank you, and congratulations on 29 days. I have a question which may be unfair, again, because of 29 days, but I was interested in your comments on the slip, trip, and falls, and in relationship to the new station upgrades. Is there an impact on the slip, trip, and falls with the new stations, when we've got now new elevators, new escalators, better flow of traffic? Is that helping to reduce some of the injuries? And you may not know this. I know it's a very detailed question. If you don't, you can just give me the information later.
What I can say is that the procurement of new escalators will actually help with preventing slips, trips, and falls, because they have new safety features, such as sensors that detect stumbles and heaters that turn on at 4 degrees Celsius to help reduce ice and slush. So yes, those new escalators will actually help reduce slip, trips, and falls.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Michelle. So I'm now going to ask Mike McDaniel, who's our President and General Manager of the Coast Mountain Bus Company to present his report.
Good morning, members of the board, Mr. Desmond, members of the public. I'm happy to be here today to present my president's report on behalf of our 5,700 staff that are, many of them out there working the system as we speak. So to start, we have an agenda up in front of you. We'll be talking about safety trends, accessibility, double-decker buses, a little bit more on the battery electric buses already updated, and then of course a C-bus update. So to start with, as we always start, we start with our safety slides, starting with employee safety. There's two bar charts you have in front of you. I'm going to ad-lib a little bit of the August to date as well. What you have up here is June year to date. We have our August figures in as of just the other day, so I'll paraphrase a couple things as we go forward. So as you see in the June to date for operator assaults, slightly up from a low last year in 2018. We did see a peak at the beginning of the year. We have seen that level off and decrease. And actually to August to date, we are actually exactly even with 2018 year to date. We're not exactly sure why that peaked at the beginning of the year. We do see when we look across all years, we have peaks and valleys of that. What I can tell you is we continue in this initiative to do training with staff. We are launching a new training program in January of next year, a full day. Staff will rotate through that every 5 years. That will include a lot of the violent incident prevention training that they've gone through in previous years. Obviously, operator protection barriers, which we've discussed before. Every new bus that comes on, including the new electrics, including the double deckers, will be getting protection barriers, as well as 400 of our existing fleet. The retro of the existing fleet will take a number of months to do, but we have approval for that. We have funding. We're just going through different design. As you can imagine, a lot of buses are a little bit different, and therefore a new design for each one needs to go on, and so that's taking a little bit more time, but it's moving forward. The second bar chart you have up there is on WorkSafe lost time claims. You'll see to the June to date, we are a little bit up again from 2018. Which is one of our lower years. I can also report for August that has leveled off again exactly for August year to date. We did have a variety of those things early in the year. Some of that is demonstrated in some of the weather challenges that we had at the beginning of the year, and that cascades through depending on which safety indicator that we're looking at. In the next set of slides, we'll talk about that effect as well. So for customer safety, pedestrian incidents with verified contact, what you'll see here, as I was just mentioning, is that, of the 31 incidents that have happened to June, 20 of them happened in Q1, and primarily surrounding the weather that happened in February. And so we see issues that impact us in the system. We see peaks in them. Obviously, we talk about ways to mitigate those, but we also see leveling off as we go forward with, regular system use as we go forward. August to date as well, from June, has improved as well. And obviously at a future board meeting, we will take a look at the Q3 results. But we are seeing spikes that we saw earlier in the year level off, and that's good news. That doesn't take our foot off the pedal, though. We are doing initiatives with this. Obviously, you saw the public campaign to customers. We are obviously doing internal stuff as well, but we need to do both. We need to do training internally for our employees relative to their safety, employees relative to our customer safety, but we also have to inform the public as well. And so a variety of campaigns are going with that. That affects the one on the right as well on onboard injury claims. We've continued to see a steady decline in this, and that's good. That's good news. And that has been a lot of the training that we've been doing. And we will continue to see that as we go forward with the initiatives on training internally as well as some of the public campaigns. So shifting over from safety to accessibility, again, with the Handy Dart Riders Alliance and our Access Transit Service Delivery team, we've been meeting with them. In fact, at one of the most recent meetings, we had a number of vehicles that we brought out, as well as teams from Coast Mountain, as well as First Transit, who is the operator of that service. And it was actually good to talk through a lot of the customer issues with the vehicles there. We all learned a lot, and we took initiatives out of that. Travel training, many of you may not inherently know what travel training is. Travel training is to inform the public how, if they're using HandyDart, how much more flexibility and freedom they have if they can at times use the conventional system. And so there's a lot of training that we do in small groups and large groups as part of this. We've done 38 sessions so far in 2019, and more to come for the rest of the year and more to come in future years. But what it does is it provides information to use the whole system, and that's the goal of that program. Off of HandyDart and onto our community shuttles, we have brought in 49. Not all are in yet, and actually these are not yet in service, but they are in service in the coming days, and they are low floor shuttles. This takes the stairs out of the high floor and increases our accessibility for everybody using shuttles. So over from that to double deckers, as was reported earlier by Kevin, this has been a little bit of an attraction internally and externally. We are very much anticipating the double deckers going into service. We've had a number of them come in so far. 32 in total will go in service this year, and we're on track for that timing for the entire year. To go into service, we're looking at mid-October. We've finished all of our safety reviews. We're in operator training as we speak. Those will go on the 300 route and the 620. So the 300 is, 301 is the Newton Exchange to Richmond Brighouse, and the 620 is, of course, the Bridgeport to the Tsawwassen Ferry terminals. Future years will have future routes. There's about 6 in total. Early in 2020 will be the 555, which is the Lougheed to Carville station. So very excited about those. And of course, what we have now launched is the battery electric bus pilot, which Kevin mentioned. And I will say that having 2 vendors of buses and 2 vendors of chargers, it is unprecedented, and it has gone well, but it's also been a challenge because we are at the cutting edge. And so we've had little hiccups along the way, but for the most part, they've been very well received. They've been in service. We'll be adding more in 2020 and 2021 with 6 in 2020 and 9 in 2021. What that will do is provide us 19 vehicles, battery electric vehicles, to electrify the entire 100 route. And that'll be a really good test for a number of months and years to see how we work the bugs out. Because as we work on our low carbon fleet strategy, there are a myriad of very challenging logistics to get through on fleet, charging, infrastructure, and we're working through that as we speak. But it is a very large project right now. But we're very excited to start off this pilot. You see Kevin launching that on September 11th there at Vancouver Transit Center. And the final update here is on Seabus. As you know, the Burrard Chinook, built by Damen of the Netherlands, arrived in the Lower Mainland just a couple months ago. The vessel recently went through local sea trials here in the first week of August. Following those, we've decided to make some final modifications of the vessel. The modifications work is to improve handling capability as the vessel sits slightly lower in the water than our other Seabus vessels. The added depth, although small, is contributed to by the hull shape and the weight of the vessel. Now, the weight of the vessel has been driven primarily by 2 things. One is a significantly upgraded emission control system, which actually decreases emissions up to 75%. So that's a huge environmental win for us. As well as from a customer perspective, we've increased the air conditioning systems in this vessel, which was also a bit heavier. So although relatively small in the depth change, it can have adverse effects in especially rough sea conditions. Also alignment issues within the terminal. So the modifications are supposed to take a number of months, starting with the design phase of those modifications, and the Chinook is still in the possession of the shipbuilder Damen. A handover will occur when all performance expectations are met, and we're currently targeting summer of 2020 for that. Our Seabus vessels are very complex pieces of machinery, and we expect to get more than 4 decades out of each use of each vessel. and it's vitally important that we get it right from the beginning. The good news is that customers will not be impacted by this. We have gone to the Mayor's Plan expansion as of September 3rd of peak service for 2.5 hours in the morning, 3.5 hours in the afternoon. And that's gone very well since. That's been made successful by using the Burrard Beaver, the Pacific Breeze, and the Otter 2, and of course, our excellent staff at CBus that are working very hard to deliver that expanded service. So the good news is customers will not be impacted, but this project is expected to complete in summer of 2020. And that concludes my update, and I'm here for any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Mike. Any questions for Mike? Murray?
Thanks for your report, Mike. Just curious about the CBus update. I agree with you that it's important to get the vessel right before we put it in service for many reasons, including safety reasons. But I'm curious, with respect to putting in service our, I guess what I'd call the spare boat, what have you done to ensure that that service will be reliable?
Yeah, we do take, it's a good question, thank you. We do take our reliability of CBus very seriously because we have a great record over many years. And so in the lead up to going into the peak service in September, we did some early preventative maintenance on a variety of things, not just on the Beaver, which is our spare vessel, but on all the vessels, in anticipation of reaching the service upgrade for September 3rd. So we're feeling actually very confident that we can continue to do preventative maintenance, that we do nighttime, weekends, long weekends, ensuring that the integrity of the schedule is there. If there is a time where we know that there's something that's a longer period that we do need to take it out of service, we'll do some communication, obviously, to the public to ensure that they know what the change is.
Thank you.
Okay, Sarah?
Thanks, Mike. I certainly understand the risk when you're, especially when you're delivering such a specialized vehicle and it's, or sorry, a vessel, and it's not in production. You can run into these problems. It's just a question. You have a plan now for addressing the issues and a timeline. How confident are you in in the solutions that you see before you and the timelines associated?
Yeah, thank you for that question. The plan is a very defined plan. It is to add buoyancy to the vessel. As I said, with the vessel sitting slightly low in the water, the answer to that, and we've modeled a variety of options. The option that we're choosing is to add buoyancy. And what that will do is when it brings it up out of the water a little bit more, any adverse wave conditions, any alignment issues that we have with the terminal will be solved. So we're feeling very confident about the plan. We're also feeling very confident about the stakeholders that are involved, from the builder to the naval architects, TransLink and CNBC. We're all aligned for one purpose, and that is to complete these modifications and get the vessel in. I think it's important to note that there are no safety or seaworthiness issues here. This was signed off as part of the builder sea trials in the Netherlands. What this is that the vessel is actually operating quite well, but it's sitting slightly low in the water. And so the remedy that we have to bring it out of the water a little bit will deal with any adverse effects, and we're very confident that the plan ahead will go ahead. Once we get out of the first phase, which is the design phase, we'll have more detail, and we can share that at the time, but we're very confident on the road ahead.
Any other questions for Mike? Murray, a follow-up, and then Marcella.
Sorry, Mike, I just wanted to confirm, are we staying within budget relative to receiving and putting the vessel in service?
Yeah, so for the budget, the budget envelope originally is $29 million. We are under budget currently, and we do anticipate through the rest of the final modifications that we will remain within the budget. And so there really is not a cost implication to this. That's from a cost perspective and a customer perspective. From a safety and seaworthiness perspective, we feel like we've crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's. And so we're now focused on delivering that final modification on the ship.
Great. Marcella, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for your report. Still on the CBus, but a different perspective. And that is, you talked about the peak hours, which is what the plan was and the funding was to put into service. I imagine there's a significant latent demand for access to the North Shore via the CBus, particularly versus any other modes. And I know there's other ways of moving around the region. as I recall, we don't currently have any funding for adding more service into the C-Bus. Is that something that, though, that we would have the capacity to do? So if through our next investment plan or the one after, we would be able to find the funding, do we have the capacity with the new C-Bus, or would we actually have to acquire another one?
So that's a complex question because it depends on when you put that extra service. But right now, obviously, we're able to deliver the peak 10-minute service that we've delivered for September. We actually situationally this last summer delivered additional service on Friday nights relative to the Lonsdale Quay night markets that were running each Friday night, and we had a surge in demand. So we're able to do that. We would need the fourth vessel, the Burrard Chinook, in service prior to any other significant expansion. But again, once we reach summer of 2020, we have that option logistically. It would then just be a funding question relative to the phase 3 as we go forward with that, which we'll be looking at as part of phase 3.
I have a second question, if I may. It was very exciting to ride the electric bus in the very short little ride we had on it. And you may have spoken to it at the time, and if you did, I forget, and I apologize. Is there a risk, and if there is, what do you do about it if the bus runs out of a charge between stations?
Yeah, so each bus, we've got two different buses, the Nova and a New Flyer. The Nova is a 40-kilometer charge. The New Flyer is a 120-kilometer charge. We do have about a 16-kilometer between each charge. Right. So we do face a situation potentially where if one of the chargers didn't charge properly, that one of the buses may run out. It would be the same if we had any of our buses break down on the road for any reason, whether it's a propulsion issue or any other issue. We would just deal with that at the time. We'd put a replacement bus in, we would tow the bus back. So this, I'd like to tell you that we never have buses that break down. We do. There's 1,500 out there at any given time, and so we would put that into the same operation that we would do for any other propulsion.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Great. Andy?
Yeah, again, thanks, Mike. Changing topics. In your written report, on one of the safety reviews, there is the review of the double-decker and the battery electric fleet. And I'd just like to say congratulations. It looks like a fairly in-depth assessment of operating and maintenance being assessed before they actually get out on the road. One of the things we've been told as the board as this was going through, but I think I'd like to hear it again. I've been asked by people out in the streets about the double-deckers, especially what happened to Ottawa. Is there, issues around double-deckers? And I noticed a fairly intense program on safety operating of these double-deckers. Maybe you could just address that.
Yeah, that's a great question, because obviously with other things that happen throughout the world, we learn from it and we implement things. So with the double deckers coming in, we did a full safety review, and we've just completed that, making sure that we understand how we're training operators, how we're training other staff that interact with them. I think one of the biggest things that we focused on was we have designated routes for our double deckers, because we have spec'd that. The height clearances, we've worked with the municipalities to ensure those areas are clear, and that's a continued operation throughout the year as we go through that. But we also have to spec any diversions that we do and procedures around that. So right now we do diversions all the time for traffic, for construction. We simply can't do a diversion as easily as we might do other ones. And so we've set up procedures specifically for that. If an operator is driving a double-decker and needs to divert, they are required to call into TCOM, which is our kind of central communications hub. And TCOM has specific approved diversion routes for every route, and they will essentially talk them through that. All the operators will be trained on that as well, but we have redundancy of that to ensure that there is safety at all turns. So we've taken it very seriously on both the double-decker side as well as the power side of the battery electric buses.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just had a quick question about transit security presence and visibility. In your report, you mentioned that the response rate from transit security officers to calls for assistance is up 15%. Is that because there's more responsiveness, or an increase in incidents, or is it a little bit of both?
Yeah, I think actually what that, where that stems from is we've changed our model, if you will. Instead of having our transit security on a bus, we have them in strategic locations, much like the police deployment on SkyTrain. Because what we found is that when they were on the bus, there was presence on the bus, but to respond to a call, it was obviously slowed down. So we've changed our approach. We've ensured presence in the system. That was one of the objectives. The other objective was being able to respond to calls in a more expeditious manner. And so we've been able to do both of those. So it's actually a change in approach, and we've just got to the point where we've reached a lot of our key performance indicators, and more to come on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions for Mike? Seeing none, Mike, when I did the tour of the double decker, I went upstairs and I was fine with the headroom, so thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to have our next speaker come. Dave Jones, who's our chief officer, who's in uniform, so glad to see that, Dave.
Thanks. Thanks, Mr. Chair, board members, and Mr. Desmond for the opportunity to present to you today. This is an update on the transit police activities as to what's been happening. One is this, and this is a good note, that our crime rates have actually been dropping, and the chart you see is a measurement per ridership, per 100,000 of ridership. And it measures the ridership, the crimes against persons, and crimes against property rates. And you can see that there was an uptake, a small uptake in the mid 2014, 2015, and we've been seeing a decline that has picked up here and is down to one of the lower levels that we haven't seen since 2010. Now, what I do want to note, though, is that our volumes for service are somewhat flat. What we're seeing is, and you heard earlier, was that the ridership numbers are up. So crime isn't increasing with increased ridership. In fact, we're able to maintain it or push it down a bit. So it's not that we've had an increase in volume. We've kind of maintained the same volume of calls for service as we've seen here. In particular, it is the crimes against persons that we focus against, and incidents such as common assault and that are down on the system here. And this incorporates the crime rates, not only the files that we've generated and look at, but our jurisdictional police partners as well. So it's not just an isolated number that we're not looking at perhaps somewhere in Coquitlam. They're taking files on that we're not aware of. This incorporates all of them. Part of it is, first of all, this is an award that we won. It's the International Association of Law Enforcement Planners, and we won the Project of the Year award. This is for the anti-sexual offending campaign on transit. So it was nice to see it. In the picture there is Beth Nielsen and Stephen Crosby on the outside, flanked by someone from the International Association of Law Enforcement Planners. And what this also led to further is that we're presenting this at the international level, this program, finding that other agencies around the world don't have a program such as this, and that complete advertising of it, and making sure that people, as we say, have a right to be safe on the, no matter which on the system, whether it be the bus or the train system or the West Coast Express or C-Bus, as we've all seen here today. Another just initiative to show you is we try to, part of the transit police, we have a community committee, I would call it. So it represents people throughout the whole region that comes in. So we're unique with the 21, 22 communities we go through. And so we have this policing committee that meets every couple of months, and they have representation from around the region, and it involves, I would say, a diverse group of people. We've got hard of hearing. You've got individuals such as this week we'll be going to Mosaic that deals with newcomers to the area. So this here was brought on, and what it is, it's a transit police communication card that is being expanded. And what it is, it's for those who are hard of hearing. And we'd like to say we did it all by ourselves, but we copied it out of Ontario. And what it does, it allows us to present to someone who is hard of hearing the idea of how we can communicate with them. And it has some quick little checks on it, which is always, how can we assist you? or we've stopped you and we're asking for, or we need something. So there's some quick communication in terms of it, and it works out. Now, we've also put on there, we like to, as reference to who else can assist us. So in this case, the Western Institute for the Deaf, if somebody needs further assistance. Now, I do acknowledge, I believe, they've changed their name right after we printed the card, so we're working on that adjustment as it goes. But that's just one of the initiatives, I think, that comes out of the whole community policing committee when we bring them together and see what their needs are and how it comes about, and they were really receptive into this. The other, and we do several initiatives, some on our own and some with the jurisdictional police agencies, but you may have heard recently there's been complaints as the value of bikes, and we're relying on people to come out towards and use transit, either cycle there, use one of the bike lockers, some just chain their bikes up to bike racks nearby. I would include in this, there's initiatives that you may have saw a press release on about cars at park and rides, such as out in the Surrey Central or in the just over the Patella Bridge here, Scott Road. You know, we take some responsibility for people who want to bring their different mode of transportation, put it there and not think that it's not going to be safe as bikes go up. So we do, and we have a very ambitious project in terms of bikes. We use a bait bike, which is like a bait car. It's kind of tagged and marked, and you take it and we're on you right away, and we're able to, you know, our goal here is to discourage the activity and tell people that it's safe to do this. It's safe to leave your bicycle here. Or in a case recently, I just point out, we worked with the Surrey RCMP where cars parked in the Scott Road area were having catalytic converters, which is a regional issue taken from their cars. But as we said, if you're going to park your car at one of our stations or in the area, we're going to take some, you know, ownership or responsibility of assisting to make sure it's left there safely, right? And so, and we worked with Surrey and recently apprehended several individuals on that. Next is, and this is, we continue to do this, we are the only agency, police agency at this point, that monitors live 24 hours a day the text number. We've done a bigger campaign now of getting back onto the SkyTrain and buses and that and putting up signage. The yellow strip marking there, it was hoped that this new decal could just go right on the yellow strip, but wasn't, so it just goes above it, and there's some new signage that's gone on. We receive daily, every day, I'm going to put in the range of 20 to 30 different incidents that get converted into police files as a result of someone texting us. Now, we get multiple texts sometimes on the same incident, but it is growing. It grew, if I got it right, by about 70% of the number of texts from last year to this year that have now grown into files. And generally, it's really productive because people feel safe about being on their phone and sending us a note, and I'd almost say sometimes it's the nuisance behaviors and activities that draw attention. But we had one the other week where somebody saw that an individual was, simply putting it, was bothering a young lady on the bus. The person thought that this just didn't sit right, and they tried to, as this young lady moved away, the person moved, and we were able to intervene in that. Just by simply texting us and letting us know, we were able to get in there. There was no criminal activity that was occurring. It was a nuisance type behavior, but for the young lady, it was really appreciated our intervention, and we were able to take her home, identify the individual to make sure that it was safe to be part of the system there. So on a note, we do get, because this number is advertised fairly widely, the texting. 2 weeks ago, we received a text about a problem on a bus. As we were trying to work our way through it, we came to realize that they were on a bus in downtown Edmonton. So people were texting us. We're looking forward to those members getting back real soon. But we've had that. We've actually had in the Whistler area where there was a fire had been located in the summertime in a bush area. They didn't have cell coverage in order to tell us to call in about the fire, but they knew we had this and were able to text us. In all those incidents, we don't say you're in Edmonton, sorry. We continue with the texting and we contact the Edmonton police on their behalf and assist them through what's happening there. Just on another note, you may have seen where it picked up a bit too is that there was the tragic death of a young person out in Langley at a skateboard park. And their family approached us later because they really liked the moniker See Something, Say Something, and someone had been dropping off these slap wristbands at the memorial site, and they were being taken every day and worn by the youth in Langley. And they approached us about that they could distribute them at the memorial on the given day. So we've had to just adjust a bit in terms of making sure that, and I'd say this to the public, is we understand that this is widely advertised and we go through lots of communities, but if anyone texts us for any reason in terms of it, we're going to assist and deal with it. We're not going to brush it off. We're not going to say, you know, I'm sorry, you're someone else. We will always provide that assistance, right? And we're hoping at some point, I believe the Abbotsford Police Department is looking at moving in this, and surprisingly enough, they've come up with a motto that says, see something, say something. So we'll be working with them. Again, we go out and do a lot of safety and outreach. We try to target some of the particular areas. You can note by the pictures here, there are so many events and festivals that go on. The one on the left side of the page there is actually right down by the Main Street Science World station, where we try to get out into some of the higher profile areas and higher volume, and obviously through different connections, whether it be the Korean Festival that was at Swangard and National Indigenous Days, and we're getting more and more invited to these types of events and activities, and we have a very ambitious outreach into the community in terms of it, and we appreciate the invitations and the opportunity to get out and explain what we do. This included assisting with the Coquitlam RCMP and their Student Police Academy through the summer. With that, the only other thing I just add with the last slide here, and you've seen earlier, was that there are a lot more special events now occurring throughout the Lower Mainland. The places such as Coquitlam has now developed Town Centre Park with kind of an amphitheater site and a festival area. Surrey's Holland Park, of course, Vancouver, New Westminster with their food truck festivals and that take up Columbia Street, is that we're doing more and more assistance with those local jurisdictional police agencies, one, to manage the crowds that they want to encourage to use transit, and these things are becoming transit focused. So to help manage those groups and people as they come in safely and out of it. And it has gone well, but it's just a note that more and more communities are finding a way to host events, which it does put pressure on us some days to help manage that crew through it. And perhaps the next one we can show you, someone has the celebration of lights ending down at the waterfront station, which is literally, it's queuing. And I'm sure that Mr. Desmond will come up with our next financial incentive that we proposed the other day. Anyways, that's it. Please, unless you have any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Dave. Any questions for Dave on the report? Larry, and then Sarah.
Dave, when we're doing station upgrades,
yes,
are your staff involved in advising on crime prevention through design and making sure that we get good prevention just by the design of our stations and their upgrades?
Yes, so we have a risk manager who looks at all that, and we try to get our input in as early as possible in terms of what we do.
Great, thank you.
Sarah?
I just have a question about the public campaigns. I mean, we do a lot of them within TransLink, and I'm curious on your thoughts of the uptake by the public when they're initially brought to them, and then how do you remind people, like, do you have a program of a scheduled, bringing them back at a certain time interval for new riders or for people that forget, or how do you manage that engagement?
Right, so it's almost like you say, there's a schedule, whether it be an annual review or a refresh on it, and whether it's to change whether you're changing the message in some way, or let's just take the yellow strip one, that, the See Something, Say Something campaign. It was very purposely laid out that it would be coincided with new decaling, new labeling on, through the enterprise, on the trains, on the buses, and there'd be a concerted effort to really re-emphasize that. The other one we do a lot of is engaging with the university students and those campaigns on an annual basis with new students arriving into places like UBC and Simon Fraser, or just about everyone, Douglas College, where new students are arriving, and making sure that we time it with through our neighborhood police officers and client services group.
Great. Harsh?
Thank you. Dave, you mentioned at the beginning of the crime stats are going down. I'm just curious, like the real numbers of actual incidents, are they going down as well? or is it just because the ridership is increasing?
It's more, it is more affected by the incidents are coming down a bit, but not at the same percentage, but ridership is climbing, so the rate per 100,000 ridership is what pushes it down.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Dave? Karen? Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Just a quick question. Are there any impediments to initiating charges, criminal charges or otherwise, when incidents occur that you face?
No, it's on a very open basis, there are no impediments to us laying a charge. I think that there are amendments that have come into play within the criminal justice system, such as a recent Bill C-75, which speaks to the issue of bail and breach charges and how they're going to be processed. And so there's no impediment to us getting it done, but there are different views and processes being established by the courts and Crown prosecutor that are something that we have to work with. But having said that, there is a role of ourselves to educate sometimes the Crown Counsel as to why something that someone would think is minor in nature is important in terms of it. So I put this out as that the issue that, when you take transit, you're not an open invitation to be harassed or bothered in any way, right? And if a person's going to engage in what someone would consider as a minor assault in a more general area, it becomes more important here, right? That because we deal with diverse and vulnerable groups that need to use transit, and we need to make it not only, it needs to be safe. That's our number one priority, is that it's going to be safe, and that how we do it is through various measures and getting Crown support.
Great. Murray?
Thanks, Tony. You hadn't mentioned this morning, but it's been about a year plus or minus since the cannabis legislation came into effect. And I'm wondering whether there's been any outcomes that you can report in relation to the activities that the Transit Police Service are engaged with as a result.
There's been nothing really of significant that has come on into it, right? Not even considered usage. We get complaints of whether they're smoking a cigarette or vaping or that, but it hasn't been an uptake. Now, maybe the aggressive don't drive high campaign has pushed your ridership up, but we haven't looked at it in that sense in terms of it. But there hasn't been an issue with cannabis or usage or transportation on the system in that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, seeing no other hands. Great. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks. I'm just happy to not be the new guy anymore.
So we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the Finance and Audit Committee. So under consent agenda, we have 4 items. We have the review of financial risk and debt management policies. It's just some very minor amendments, mostly housekeeping. We have updates on the Patella Bridge Condition Monitoring Report, an update on the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain and Broadway Subway Project. So a motion to receive the consent by Murray. Second, Andy, all in favor? Great, approved, thank you. So we'll move to item 5.2, which is a
Sorry,
report.
Mr. Chair, can I just make a comment on the consent agenda?
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment regarding the Patella Bridge monitoring report and compliment management for continuing their vigilance in monitoring in all ways, the decks, the railings, the pediments, everything on that bridge, given how old it is. We know we've got a replacement bridge coming, but I am always comforted in all ways to see that report on a regular basis, to know all the work that's being done to ensure that it's safe for the public above and below. So
Yeah,
just want to compliment management on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yeah, no, they're continuing to monitor, which is important, obviously, until we get the new bridge. So next is a report on the Finance and Audit Committee meeting, and Sarah, you're going to be providing that report today.
I am, thank you. It was a full agenda this time. A lot of the morning was spent on the plan for our external auditors as they move forward into audit season. We were also updated by our internal audit program lead, including TransLink's own internal Lean Academy program, which is starting to get a lot of very interesting traction without the organization and results in the initiatives that it's been leading with its own staff. On the capital engineering report side, we did hear a report on how the budgets are set for our capital projects, and then more, as importantly, how they are managed after the project has been awarded to a contractor so that we are maintaining a on time and on budget program. We also had an update on the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain and the south of the Fraser Transit program. On the corporate services side, we received the quarterly safety report, which was very in-depth and included all of the 3 operating subsidiaries, and we were able to see the progress, which was also emphasized today across the organization. And we went into the timeline for the next investment plan as well, which will be receiving a lot more time and effort as we move forward in the next phases. There were several resolutions passed. One was a banking resolution, which was passed primarily for housekeeping reasons, people's titles, and personnel changes. And we did approve a bond issuance for this year for $200 million. And that is the summary of the report. So if there's any questions.
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? Andy?
Yeah, if you could just refresh me on the bond issue. Are these going to be green bonds or conventional?
Yes, they are.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, the agenda does call for a short break, but seeing that we're ahead of schedule, unless someone urgently needs that break, I propose we just continue. Okay, great, thank you. So we'll move to the Planning and Stakeholder Committee report from Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We had a long and complicated meeting with a lot of different items, and I'll just summarize those. 2 are actually the next items on the agenda. The Cypress Village Shuttle, which we've reviewed several times. We had the chief planner from West Vancouver to answer some questions about how this proposition goes with the planning that's happening there. We were very comfortable, and so we recommend approval of that when it comes forward next. And then we had, well, what for planners is a very exciting thing, which is the 2017 Regional Trip Diary Study. And it's important because this is really the most comprehensive information that we have on transportation behavior. And it's used in all the studies. And the last time it was done was 2011, I think. I think it's going to be perhaps talked about more today, but it is going to be talked about more today. But this was a really important source of information, and we were briefed fully on that. We received briefings, updates on many items that the staff are working on. It's just amazing the amount of work that is going on transit service partnerships policy development, because we're not quite coherent about how we're dealing with different kinds of partnerships, and we're doing more of that. Customer experience with Handy Dart registration eligibility, and wanting to make sure that we deliver that in a very effective way that's helpful for our customers. The way that we handle the delivery of North Shore transit service is being reviewed. Very importantly, as shared use mobility comes into the region more and more, a regional approach to licensing and regulation is now under review, which is, we're all very pleased to see TransLink taking a leadership role. We got an update on the Burnaby Mountain Gondola, because now we have inputs from the Burnaby municipality, which is really helping us to focus in on any remaining concerns citizens and others might have as we move that forward. And then we had a full briefing on the engagements for the south of Fraser Rapid Transit, and also for the Transport 2050. Amazing outreach happening with citizens all over the region, and so we had a full report on that, and I think Kevin alluded to that earlier. 3 reports are of particular interest, I think, to customers and this public agenda. One of those is that a report will be out next month on bus speed and reliability. People who are worried about, their trip, and is it going to be on time? Is it going to get them where they need to go? The organization is taking this very, very seriously, and not only just studying it, but coming up with a toolkit so that where there are those difficult areas, the TransLink can work with the municipalities to clear that up and really get the buses moving very efficiently. And that's going to come out next month, and I think people will enjoy the changes that come out of that over the next while. The second is to really look at bus stop accessibility for those with sight loss, very seriously taking the concerns of people who aren't full-sighted and make sure they have information they can access in a fair and equitable way with all of our other customers. That work study is underway. And then, as we've heard in many delegations here over the last few years, mitigation of noise. There's a wide effort underway, technical effort, all kinds of measures on SkyTrain to mitigate the noise that some of our customers are experiencing. Is being taken very seriously, and you heard a bit of that report today from Michelle. So it was a very long agenda, interesting agenda, and shows so much work across so many topics is underway with an emphasis on our customer and customer satisfaction and our service.
Thank you, Larry, for that report. Any questions for Larry? Larry?
Just wanted to raise again the speed and reliability report and the fact that there's evidence that congestion in the region is limiting our ability to deliver service in a timely way. It's not drastically down, but it's edging down because of that. And it builds, in the context of Mayor Cote's work and the Mayor's Council work, the Cure Congestion campaign demonstrates the importance of us dealing with that effectively at every level of government. And I think that the Cure Congestion campaign that the region has initiated with the federal government through this election campaign, it is important that people become engaged with that and tell their local candidates their interest in ensuring that the federal government remains involved locally to provide funding that will help us to reduce congestion, and that in effect will improve not only the quality of life but the economy and many things that come with that effectively. So it isn't incidental, it's having consequential impacts on the region that need to be addressed, and the more people talk about it with those that are running for office federally, the better off we'll be regionally.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, the transportation infrastructure funding in terms of getting an ongoing reliable source is important. And at the same time, it's also important that we do things more efficiently. And I think the reliability study just demonstrates that in all our bus service routes, there's ways that we can improve the reliability and the service by just making the necessary modifications or enhancements where there is congestion. So.
And the key to this is that it's a collaboration between the municipalities and us. And now we're really highlighting the tools that can be brought to bear to foster that collaboration and get some answers and get things fixed. So it's a very positive initiative.
I look forward to that, receiving that report. That's great. Okay, so seeing no other questions for Larry, we'll move to the next item on the agenda, which is the independent transit service application, and Larry mentioned it, for Cypress Village Shuttle. So Jeff and Sarah are here, and I'm not sure, Jeff, are you or Sarah going to speak?
Sarah's going to take this on. Larry gave a good preface that we did have the Director of Planning from West Vancouver come in to provide some context to what's in the report as well. So Sarah will walk through the key issues.
Thank you. So as you know, and for context, the provincial legislation, the South Coast BC Transportation Authority Act, states that no person or municipality can operate an independent transit service without, unless it does so with approval from TransLink and under any conditions that we require. And this legislation permits TransLink to give approval if the independent transit service will not reduce the effectiveness or financial viability of the regional transportation system. An independent transit service is something that is operated by a third party, that is open to the public to get on and off, that is serving trips of multiple purposes. TransLink does not provide any funding whatsoever to these independent transit services, and these would be different than a company that runs a shuttle for their employees, for example. So British Pacific Properties is seeking approval for an ITS to operate between a proposed new development called Cypress Village and Cypress West and Park Royal Mall. So British Pacific Properties owns a significant amount of land north of the highway in West Vancouver, and they have development rights for that land. And in their proposed plan, the development rights for single-family housing would be transferred to be concentrated in higher density development in a what they're calling a Cypress Village, and then a later stage development called Cypress West. And that much of the land that currently is zoned for single-family would not be developed and would be protected. The District of West Vancouver wants to ensure that this community is designed to be a walkable community and that it would be accessed by transit. And so as the proposed site and corridor are not identified as an area for expansion in any of TransLink's current plans, British Pacific Properties has applied for approval to operate an independent transit service when that development is in place. So we've assessed this proposal against the terms set out in our ITS policy, which was approved by the board in 2012. We've determined it does meet the definition of being an independent transit service, but because it would not compete with any of our existing transit service, and we don't have anything currently planned, our assessment is that it would not impact either the effectiveness of our system or the financial viability of our system. So our recommendation, as set out in the report, is that the board determine it to be an ITS and to approve it to operate under the conditions set out in the report.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I think Larry has a question.
Well, actually, I want to move approval.
You want to move it? Okay.
And then make a comment if I could.
Okay.
I'll move approval.
Sure.
What I like about this is that as that development occurs, traditionally there would probably be no transit whatsoever. People get into bad habits, transportation habits, and it's hard to change. We could certainly not be in a position to justify with all the demands around the region. But having this occur, I think, as development occurs, will actually set people up to then enjoy transit and become a part of the transit family as we can deliver service, as it builds, as demand builds. So this is one of those cases where I think it's an independent service. It's not going to cost us. It's not going to take priorities from others. But it will build a kind of a tradition of transit use, and that goes with what the municipality is trying to do. And this is why we asked the planner to come. The municipality is also trying to cluster that development, and that sets up more transit-oriented kind of development. And so this really makes the piece whole, and I think we should be supportive of it. And at no cost to us, and no cost to the demands that are already there elsewhere in the region.
Okay, thanks, Larry. Any other questions for Sarah? Seeing none, I think Marcella seconded. All in favor? Opposed? I think carried unanimously. Great, thank you very much. So Jeff, you're going to stay and continue with the next item, which is the report on the 2017 regional trip diary.
Thank you, Chair. Joining me is Alon Elgar, who is our manager of forecasting, who oversees the regional transportation model and other forecasting tools, as well as the regional trip diary. Larry pointed out that this is a really key piece for us and all the work that Alon's group does, both for TransLink as well as for other agencies. So the regional transportation model is used by municipalities, it's used by consultants, it's used even by the ministry. So it's really important that we're constantly keeping it up to date. We do these every 5 to 6 years, and this is probably about the 5th or 6th in the series over the last 20-some years. So what you're getting is a snapshot, basically, of what fall 2017 versus 2011, which was the previous one. It is then used for, as I mentioned, the modeling, but it also helps us look at how our policies, both from a transportation and a land use perspective, are working across the region. Those things take a long time. to change, land use obviously, so these trends tend to be very slow, which is maybe getting in advance of the question, why don't we do it more often? Well, you can have fluctuations, but for larger trends, it takes those sort of structural things to change. We did see in that period a lot of growth within the region. We added 250,000 people. You've probably heard that for a while. It's why a lot of the reasons why we're seeing overcrowding on the transit system. We added even proportionally more jobs, about 150,000 jobs. And what we saw in that strong economy is that there was an increase in more trips for retail and other activities. We have not done all the analysis on why we're seeing this trends yet. This is really to tell you what sort of dispassionately is happening out there. Then we have to kind of backcast and understand what's driving everything. But we do know we have a strong economy, and those things are very correlated. So as a result, this is no surprise, and maybe feeds back to Larry's comments about bus speed and reliability and Murray's points as well. There's more driving, there's more trips happening all across the system, significantly more. We were almost at 8 million trips a day in 2017 compared to the 6.5 million. That's for all modes. And there is more driving. So we saw about 13% increase in vehicle kilometers traveled in that 6-year period. There were some fairly significant changes to the road network, not in necessarily overall capacity, but especially as it related to key pinch points. We're all aware of the Port Mann Bridge coming on, the tolls coming off. These things all impact the transportation network, as did the Evergreen extension. One really positive thing over all the series, we've yet to see until now an actual decrease in auto driver mode share. So this is the first significant one where we saw a 4% reduction in the share of overall trips. I've said there's more driving. We've seen huge increases, but in the proportionality, the share is going down a bit. And the flip side of that is we're seeing improvements towards our goals of sustainable mode share. We're still a long way from that 50% target identified in the regional transportation strategy for sustainable mode share, but we saw the bulk of this increase actually go to walking. And while I said we haven't done the analysis, that's certainly a positive trend. We're seeing people take more trips. The amount of densification around town centers may be working, all of those kinds of things. We saw bike share as a proportion. More biking is happening, but as a proportion, it's about the same in the region, which will cause us pause to sort of think about what should we be doing more of. And transit mode share actually dropped a little bit, even though ridership has been rising. Part of that was, this was, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2017. We had just started our recent expansion in early 2017, so it does not capture a lot of the increases that we've seen over the last couple of years, but does emphasize that you need to invest a lot just to keep up with this. So as I mentioned, we'll be doing a fair bit of analysis. We've created a video that goes through and explains how this is done. It's for the public, it's for other agencies, academics use this material. Alon and his team have this time around produced an interactive tool that you can go down and drill down by different questions and by different geographies, so the municipalities can work with this and the agencies can work with this by themselves, and academics actually, because this is such an important piece. One thing I didn't mention, the way that we deliver this trip diary has changed over the years. We used to do just a mail-out survey, et cetera. That is getting tougher and tougher. We are now using an online app or an actual mobile phone app. So it gives us more information, but we have to constantly be recalibrating against different methods that we did previously. So that takes Alon's team a lot of work to do apples-to-apples comparisons. And I'll leave it at that, Chair.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Any questions for Jeff? We got Murray, then Marcella, and then Jonathan.
Thank you, Jeff. Very interesting study and results. The one statistic that you provided at the committee level that you didn't provide today that I found alarming, may not be the right word, but sort of in that direction, is the number of trips that are made per person in the region has increased by about 10% over that time frame from 2011 to 2017. So it appears that people that live here are interested in going out more. And that 10% increment, if you multiply it by the 2.5 million people or more that live here now, is significant. 250,000 trips a day, basically more than if you would have taken that ratio back in 2011. So it demonstrates that although more congestion exists, there's still this propensity to be out and about more than, and it's increasing, the trend is increasing. I had asked at the committee level, and it may be helpful to provide at some point in time what that looked like over the 6 iterations of the survey that have been done since the 1980s.
I think that's a good point. It is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a snapshot, and it is a trend, but there were different trends in 2011 and different conditions. Alon has pointed out in 2011 we were at the end of an economic recession and just recovering. The amount of people doing different trips or not taking trips at all has maybe changed as well. So you have to kind of look at, try and eliminate the noise a bit and see where the long-term trends are going.
Right, thank you.
Marcelo?
We did look at it over the years, and since 1985, which was the first one, most years it was over 3. Right now it's about 3.2. And over the years we had it at 3.1 to 3.3. And then it really fell pretty precipitously in 2008. And 2011 was more similar to 2008, although it was a bit higher. And now we see it sort of coming back to where it was in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Okay, Marcelo?
Thank you. Just a couple questions. Do other regions do this form of analysis of a trip diary and use it for their planning as well?
Yes, so it's done both in Canada and the US. Okay. In Canada, it's usually done once every 5 years in Montreal and in Toronto, so it's usually in parallel to the census. In the US, I believe in most places it's about once every 10 years. Their census is about once every 10 years as well. And in Canada, usually, I find that the sample sizes are much larger compared to the US. So in our case, it was 2.5% of the population. In Toronto, it's about 5% of the population. In the US, usually surveys are smaller.
Okay, thank you. My second question, and I think I know what the answer is. This was just a random request of people, right, to keep a trip diary. Included in this, are there trucking and commercial vehicles? Or is this all personal?
No, it's all personal. For trucking and commercial, we usually collect information separately.
So in order to fully understand what's happening, you have to layer in the goods movement in the region.
Right.
And so all we're getting a picture here is people movement as opposed to goods movement. Okay, thank you.
Great. Jonathan?
Thank you. Well, a really interesting report. I was a little bit disappointed to see the transit mode share kind of flatline between 2011 and 2017. I know we've had tremendous growth over the last 3 years, and I recognize this trip diary was done 2 years ago, so it may not have captured that. But I guess what I'm wondering is, what was our ridership growth between 2011 and 2017? Because I'd be curious to know, even in terms of raw numbers, increased ridership, was the rate lower during that period than we've seen in the last couple of years, or are we just basically seeing our ridership increase just essentially keeping track with population growth?
Maybe Alon can add some details, but on the macro scene, it was lower than population and employment growth. So we did see some increases in those early years between 2011 and 2012. We had a couple of actual flat years or even declines in ridership. And then when Evergreen came on, we also saw some increases.
So in the trip diary, the increase was about 15% in transit. So that was higher than the increase in population and employment, which were 11% and 12% respectively. So in absolute terms, transit increased. As mode share, it decreased, and that's mostly because of the really large increase in walking that we found mostly around urban centers and town centers and around the region, but also outside of town centers.
Do we think if we did this survey today, though, would the transit numbers see a little bit of an uptake given the increases, or do you think it'd be quite similar to what we're seeing here? And I know I might be asking a difficult question, impossible to answer, but.
It's difficult to say, but we know from our compass card that the last few years, the increase in ridership was about 5 or 6% per year. And we know that until 2016 or 2017, the ridership was pretty stable from 2011 to that point. So you would expect it to be higher. It's very difficult for us to compare it to other modes because we didn't necessarily expect this large of increase in walking. But then when we analyzed it and we thought about growth in the region, it sort of made sense.
Yeah. Now, what's been presented is pretty high-level details. I suspect there's probably a lot of really interesting information that's going to come out of looking further. Are we anticipating kind of some further, more detailed reports coming back to the board?
Yeah, absolutely. So these are just, as I mentioned, kind of reflections on what we're seeing without trying to dive down and understand what's the root causes of those, other than sort of pure math, as Alon is pointing to, but looking at what was happening with the economy, what happened with land use, et cetera, and try and apply that against the policies that have been in place in the region. As I mentioned at the onset, this is really important for Transport 2050. And even sometimes seeing a decrease in mode share may not always be the worst thing. Like if we're seeing an increase in walking, that's definitely our highest priority. We want to see walking increase and driving decrease. So understanding those bigger trends will take a bit of time. There are, I think, literally billions of pieces of data associated with this. So to your point about being able to drill down, the online tool will help people answer all sorts of questions.
So for the transit geeks out there, when is this going to be available online for people to kind of dig around and
We're planning to have it today.
Okay.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. Larry?
Just a short question. By the way, I think we should notice that the Liberal Region Plan that we did way back in the 1970s is now coming home to roost in a very nice way by more walking. We should say that because all over the region at every single town center, we're seeing growth and diversification, which is just great. You told us in the committee that you can also deal with this data in sub-areas as well as overall regionally, so which means it really will be helpful when you're trying to zero in. How focused can you get?
So the online visualization tool will be at the municipal level.
Right.
For the larger municipalities, some of the smaller ones, because of the small sample sizes, it won't be possible. Overall, we do the survey and we expand to a level of 60 sub-regions. So it depends on the size of the municipality, but to give you an example, in Vancouver there are 9 sub-regions, in Surrey 6 sub-regions, and in Richmond 4 sub-regions. So that kind of the level that people could drill to.
So the municipalities, for example, Vancouver, can compare performance of downtown versus the rest of the municipality versus the region. Or Surrey could do with their downtown.
Absolutely.
Or New Westminster with their downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Murray and then I think Andy.
Thank you, Tony. The thing that comes to mind in the context of a mode share and how things are operating right now is that many of our routes are operating at capacity, particularly when people want to make their trips. And so every time we add capacity, like the Evergreen line, it tends to be taken up very quickly, and we achieve the ridership on that line. But in relation to need, there is actually the latent capacity that's available is a smaller proportion of total capacity now than it was historically. And so I suspect that a lot of this has to do, the mode share issue has to do with just having capacity available that would encourage people to use transit by virtue of the reliability that would experience when they choose it as their mode option. So it comes back to this idea of us continuing to press at every level for additional funding to deal with congestion as well as with capacity that will help to cure some of the congestion problems we experience?
Yeah, it shows the order of magnitude of investment that's required just to move the dial, just to keep up with the population. And as Alam pointed out, it was roughly a 15% increase in transit in that period, which was a period of underinvestment compared to even now where we are. Now we're seeing, as Kevin pointed out, on the order of sort of 5% increases in ridership per year. That's really significant. And to try and catch up, we've certainly improved the overall effectiveness of this system. Where we did have latent demand, we've now seen higher productivity, and where we had some capacity, but now more and more routes, even after 3 years of investment, are overcrowded. Okay, Andy?
Yeah, this is more a comment than a question. Since I first saw these numbers and sort of talking about this just within the general public, we've been talking about how, as Jonathan says, the transit geeks will drill down and the planners will look at this. But a lot of the information here seems to the general public counter to what their expectations are. We've been hearing lots of stories about the increase in public transit, all these rides and everything. Then we look at the numbers and see we've dropped our mode share. We hear all about congestion, yet we see now that there's a decrease in the order share. So I think the messaging as we go forward, and it speaks to Larry's stuff about planning, that there's a communications battle here for the hearts and minds of people to understand some of these things as well without going down. They're not going to drill down to those sub-factors and regionals, but just to understand that the complexity of it, and that some of those commonly held perceptions aren't necessarily bearing out. I talked about this increase in walking, and most people looked at me like I was crazy, right? Nobody walks. So we're seeing these things coming through, and I think the communication strategy that we use as we roll out and develop 2050, based on the success of some of these models, and I think this was brought home as well just recently when we had the 10-year anniversary of the bike lanes in Vancouver, and there's people on TV saying, who ever thought anybody would ride a bike? Well, a lot of people did, but it took a while to get there. So I think we're in the same situation here, and utilizing this information as a public relations communication strategy is just as important as the planning strategy.
Okay.
In fact, I just wanted to follow up and say, we have a lot of programs on safety and other things, on our system. It might be good just to put some of this information on our system so that people can begin to see that things are changing, and that maybe they can enjoy joining the new trend.
Great. Well, a lot of good comments. I think we have one last one from Marcella, and then we will move on.
I'll keep my next report really short for the question. We've talked a lot about how we use the data. We talked a lot about it at the committee level. You made a comment just now, which I thought was very powerful, which was that it shows how much investment is required to move the dial. I mean, as a region, we really need to move that dial. We want to change the dial. It's the objective of the whole region. So obviously, investment comes from a number of places. One is several government levels. Is this information that you can and will use in a way to show to governments or potential funders the kind of investment that's actually required to change the dial, move people, and move to the mode share? Because the other levels of government are also interested in exactly the same thing. So is that something that you plan to do?
Yeah, thanks, Marcella. It is part of what drives the funding strategy needs and the investment needs, is to understand what does it take to keep up with inflation, just to keep up with the amount of growth, population growth, which, you combine those two things together, it's like 3 to 4% more per year, let alone, to Andy's point, shifting more and more people onto transit. Then you need multiples of that. Our long-term goal of having 50% mode share was basically the equivalent of accommodating all the people over the next 25 years onto those alternative modes, so that the level of road congestion and use we see today is about the same. That's a daunting task, and we're moving at maybe a third of the rate that we need to be based on what we saw here.
Great. Okay, Jeff. Well, thank you very much. As you can see, a lot of interest in this topic, so I'm sure we'll look forward to you coming back with a little bit more of the detail and analysis once that's complete. So the last item on the agenda is an update from the Human Resources and Governance Committee, and Marcella, you're going to be providing that to us, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I promise I'll be short. We looked at both the governance, which underpins a lot of the processes, enables a lot of the work that we see being done by the people, and of course the HR report, which enables the people to do the work that they're doing here today. So on the governance side, we reviewed our semi-annual privacy management report. And the program is to ensure privacy is built into all of TransLink's initiatives. And as we build out more initiatives, we have to keep looking at more ways in which those services and initiatives embed privacy for individuals, not only to meet the law, but because it's the right thing to do. So we looked at a number of those. One of the key things that's coming out is a draft Compass privacy policy. We've been looking at that for some period of time, so we've looked at a draft of that. That's good to see. We had another thing that the organization does is a regular risk assessment of of a number of the initiatives to make sure that those initiatives are performing as they're intended to perform. And the report looked at things from the My Kudos program within the organization to a board portal program, which of course I'm keenly interested in. We looked at what kind of mandatory training is going on within the organization that's required for a lot of the processes that are going on. We looked at, it was reported to us that there were 7 breaches that were identified in the risk assessment, but none of them caused any harm to individuals or processes, so they weren't significant ones. We looked at FOI requests and they're tracking as usual, nothing specific to report on that front. The next large process is the Director and Employee Code of Conduct semi-annual report. The only thing to report under there is that during the 6 months from January to June, there were only two reports of non-compliance. They were both investigated and acted upon, so nothing significant in that area. We then had a comprehensive human resources report, which brought us up to speed on a number of topics, from employee turnover, employee breakdown of the employees we have in the organization, talent attraction, and all the other issues related to the human resources processes. Notably, human resources has received over 12,400 resumes for jobs in this organization over a 6-month period. Of that, 354 positions were filled. Of the 354 positions, it was a mix of new hires and internal candidates. One of the big efforts, as you all know and you've heard before, is the operator recruitment. So the operator recruitment is on target where they need to be. They've hired the number up to the 6-month period that we were looking at, but they're still looking at a significant number of operators, and I think the number was around 500 people that are still being sought in the organization to keep up with the demand and the new service that's coming around here. We reviewed the programs around diversity, around building talent, leadership development, our mentorship program, training participation, speakers, and employee engagement. And just want to comment, the report was very thorough, and if anybody wants to see more details, Annabelle would be happy to provide it to you. We looked at subsidiary board appointments, which you've heard about before. And with that, I'll conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Any questions for Marcella? Seeing none, that actually brings us to the end of our meeting, and I want to particularly thank Albert for staying right to the end with us, so thank you very much, and we invite you back to our next quarterly public meeting in December, and so this will conclude our meeting for today.